At 4,000 meters, the math doesn't lie. Wind speed, 12 knots gusting to 18. Temperature differential, 34 degrees between shooter and target. Coriolis effect, 1.2 mils at this latitude. One shot, one chance. And the only person who could make it was a 19-year-old nobody that every operator in the valley had already written off as dead weight. Corporal Alara Quinn didn't look like a killer. 5 feet 4 inches, 118 pounds soaking wet, with hands too small for her rifle's grip. When she stepped off the transport at Forward Operating Base Viper, the SEAL team took one look and started the countdown to her failure. Give her a week, they said. 2 if she's lucky. They were wrong. But before you find out why, stick with me to the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. Because what happened in those mountains? It rewrote the rulebook on what's possible when everyone's already decided you don't belong. Now let's go back to where it started. To the dust, the heat, and the moment everything changed. The C-130's ramp dropped, and the Afghan sun hit like a physical blow. Alara Quinn stepped onto the tarmac of FOB Viper, carrying 85 pounds of gear on a frame built for half that. The heat shimmered in waves across the airfield, turning the distant mountains into liquid mirages. Jesus Christ, someone muttered behind her. They're sending us children now? She didn't turn around, didn't react, just kept walking toward the staging area where the rest of Task Force Sentinel waited in the shade of a sun-bleached hangar. Senior Chief Marcus Dalton saw her first. 6'3", 220 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, with eyes that had seen 3 wars and hadn't blinked at any of them. He was leaning against a Humvee, arms crossed, watching her approach like she was a curiosity instead of a combat asset. You Quinn? His voice could strip paint. Yes, Senior Chief. You look 12. I'm 19, Senior Chief. Same thing. He spat into the dust. Who the hell approved this? Alara set down her ruck, grateful to get the weight off her shoulders, even for a minute. Commander Mitchell, Senior Chief. I scored 98th percentile in... I don't care what you scored on a range in California with no one shooting back. Dalton pushed off the Humvee and circled her slowly, assessing. I care if you can put rounds on target when you're bleeding, when you haven't slept in 3 days, when the guy next to you just took shrapnel to the face and won't stop screaming. Can you do that, Corporal? I don't know, Senior Chief. That stopped him. What? I said I don't know. Alara met his eyes without flinching. I've never been in combat, but I'll find out when it happens. For a long moment, Dalton just stared at her. Then something that might have been respect, or might have been pity, flickered across his face. At least you're honest. Most rookies lie through their teeth. He jerked his thumb toward the hangar. Gear up. We're doing live fire drills in 20. Try not to shoot anyone on our side. The other shooters were already on the range when she arrived. 8 men, all special operations, SEALs, Rangers, a Delta operator on loan from another task force. They stopped talking when she walked up. Oh, you've got to be shitting me, said a voice from the right. Petty Officer Jake Hendricks, according to the name tape on his chest. Square-jawed, cocky smile. The kind of operator who'd been told he was God's gift since BUD/S. That's our 6th shooter? Guess someone lost a bet, another one said. Alara started assembling her rifle. M110 SASS, 7.62 millimeters, topped with a Schmidt and Bender scope she'd saved 6 months of paychecks to buy. She'd fired this weapon so many times she could break it down blindfolded. What's that? Your dad's gun? Hendricks stepped closer, grinning. Looks bigger than you. It's my gun, Alara said quietly, sliding the bolt into place with a smooth click. Cute. He turned to the others. $20 says she can't hit past 800 meters. I'll take that bet, said another SEAL, but I'm saying 600. You're both generous, a third one chimed in. I give her 400 before she starts crying about the recoil. Alara said nothing, just finished her setup and waited. The range master called them to the line. Targets at 600, 800, 1,000, and 1,200 meters. Standard wind, mid-afternoon heat creating serious mirage effects. 5 shots each at each distance. Best grouping wins. Hendricks went first. Smooth, practiced, efficient. 4 hits at 600, 3 at 800, 2 at 1,000. Clean misses at 1,200. Heatwave's murder past 1,000, he said, stepping back. Can't read it today. The others went in sequence. Similar results. Good shooters, all of them, but the atmospheric conditions were brutal. The heat rising off the desert floor created optical distortions that made the distant targets dance and blur. Then it was Alara's turn. She settled into position, feeling the rifle's weight distribute across her body, controlled her breathing, watched the mirage. There, a pattern. The heat waves weren't random. They flowed, pulsed, followed rhythms dictated by temperature gradients and wind currents. She'd spent countless hours studying this, reading meteorological papers, learning to see the invisible. First shot at 600 meters, dead center. Lucky, someone muttered. Second shot, same hole. The muttering stopped. She worked her way through the distances, reading the air like sheet music, making micro adjustments for each shot. By the time she reached 1,200 meters, the distance that had defeated everyone else, she knew exactly where to aim. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. A second later, the spotter called it. Center mass, perfect hit. Silence. Then Hendricks walked over to check the scope, like maybe she'd cheated somehow, used magic optics or something. But the scope was standard issue, same as everyone else's. Beginner's luck, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Alara cleared her weapon and stood up. Maybe. Senior Chief Dalton was watching from the observation tower. He didn't say anything, just made a note on his clipboard and walked away. Yeah, that night in the chow hall, Alara ate alone. The other shooters sat together at the far end, their voices a low rumble of shop talk and war stories. She didn't try to join them, didn't expect to be invited. She was halfway through an MRE that tasted like cardboard and regret when someone sat down across from her. Specialist Danny Ortiz. Communications tech, 22 years old, perpetually sunburned. He'd been watching the range drill from the comms shack. That was something else today, he said, opening his own MRE. Never seen shooting like that. Thanks. They're saying it was luck. I know. Was it? Alara looked up at him. Does it matter? Ortiz grinned. Nope, not even a little bit. You made Hendricks look like a rookie, and that's beautiful regardless of how it happened. He took a bite of something that might have been meatloaf. Fair warning, though, he's not going to let it go. Guys like that don't handle embarrassment well. I didn't mean to embarrass anyone. Doesn't matter what you meant. Matters what happened. Ortiz leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, I've been here 8 months. These guys, they're good at what they do, but they're also convinced they're the only ones who can do it. You just challenge that belief. So they're going to test you, hard. They're going to try to break you. Let them try. That's the spirit. He raised his water bottle in a mock toast. Just don't get yourself killed proving a point. We're short-staffed enough as it is. The warning proved accurate faster than Alara expected. The next morning, she was assigned to equipment detail, hauling ammo crates in 110-degree heat while the rest of the team ran mission prep. When that didn't break her, they accidentally scheduled her for night watch 3 times in a row, making sleep impossible. When she showed up alert anyway, fueled by instant coffee and spite, they started giving her the worst assignments. Latrine detail, guard duty during sandstorms, any grunt work they could find. She did it all without complaint. A week passed, then 2. The range drills continued. Every time Alara outshot them. Not by huge margins, she wasn't trying to showboat, but consistently, reliably. The margins of victory were small enough to be attributed to luck at first, but luck doesn't repeat itself 12 times in a row. Senior Chief Dalton noticed. He didn't say much, but he started watching her more carefully during briefings, asking her opinion on wind conditions, atmospheric effects. Hendricks noticed too, and he didn't like it. Must be nice, he said one afternoon, intercepting her on the way back from the range. Having the senior chief's attention. I'm just doing my job, Hendricks. Your job. He stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. Your job is to follow orders and try not to get real operators killed when shit goes sideways. That's it. You're not here to be a hero. Alara looked up at him, way up, because he had 8 inches on her, and kept her voice level. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to be useful. You want to be useful? Stop making us look bad on the range. Then shoot better. It was out before she could stop it. Hendricks' face went red, his jaw clenching so hard she could hear teeth grinding. For a moment, she thought he might actually take a swing at her. Instead, he smiled, cold and predatory. You know what? You're right. I should shoot better. In fact, why don't we make this interesting? He raised his voice, calling to the other shooters. Hey, how about a real test? Not this range bull, something that actually matters. The others gathered around, sensing drama. What'd you have in mind? One of them asked. Hendricks' smile widened. Moving target drill, long range. Winner gets to lead the next mission's Overwatch position. Alara's stomach dropped. Overwatch on a real mission. That was a combat role, not a support assignment. If she won, it would mean actual operational deployment. If she lost, they'd never let her live it down. I'm in, she heard herself say. Optik. They set it up for the following afternoon. A remote section of the range, 1,400 meters out. The target? A man-sized silhouette mounted on a motorized track, moving at variable speeds designed to simulate enemy combatants in motion. The entire task force turned out to watch. Word had spread fast. The rookie versus Hendricks, real stakes on the line. Senior Chief Dalton stood to the side, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Hendricks went first, taking his time to set up. He was a good shooter, Alara had to admit. 3 hits out of 5 attempts, solid performance. Then it was her turn. She settled into position and immediately felt it, the pressure. Not from the rifle or the distance, but from the eyes watching her. All those men, waiting to see if she'd fold. The target started moving. First shot, high and right. Miss. Murmurs from the crowd. She adjusted, factored in the movement speed. Second shot, clipped the edge, partial hit. More murmurs, louder now. Hendricks was grinning. Alara blocked it out. Focused on the math, the wind, the rhythm of the target's movement. Found the pattern. Third shot, center mass. Fourth shot, center mass. Fifth shot, dead center, stopping the target's motor. The crowd went silent. Then someone started clapping, slowly. Ortiz standing at the back. A few others joined in, reluctant but unable to deny what they'd seen. Hendricks' face had gone from smug to stone. He walked past her without a word, shoulder-checking her hard enough to make her stumble. Senior Chief Dalton approached, that same unreadable expression on his weathered face. Guess you're on Overwatch for the next op, he said quietly. Hope you're ready, Corporal, because this isn't a game anymore. Real bullets, real consequences. People die if you miss. I know, Senior Chief. Do you? He studied her for a long moment. We ship out in 3 days. Mission brief tomorrow at 0600. Don't be late. He walked away, leaving Alara standing alone on the range as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. 3 days. 72 hours until everything changed. She should have felt excited, victorious even. Instead, all she felt was the weight of that rifle on her shoulders, and the certainty that soon it would be aimed at something that could shoot back. The mission briefing was held in a plywood structure that passed for a conference room. Maps covered every wall, marked with red zones and blue corridors, threat assessments and fallback positions. Dalton stood at the front, laser pointer in hand. Target is here, he said, indicating a compound in a valley system 40 clicks northwest. Taliban regional commander confirmed by 3 separate sources. Intel says he's using this location as a staging ground for IED production. We go in, we confirm, we call in the strike. Rules of engagement? Someone asked. Weapons free on confirmed hostiles, but this is a soft approach. We're ghosts. In and out before they know we're there. Air support on standby, but we don't call it unless things go completely sideways. The briefing continued for an hour. Insertion plan. Helicopter drop at a safe LZ 3 clicks from target. Approach on foot under cover of darkness. Set up observation post, confirm target identity, paint it for the strike. Simple. Clean. The kind of mission they'd run 100 times. Except this time, Alara would be part of it. Quinn, Dalton said, making her jump slightly. You're on Overwatch. Primary position here, he pointed to a ridge overlooking the compound. With a secondary fallback here. Your job is to watch our 6 and provide covering fire if we get compromised. Think you can handle that? Yes, Senior Chief. Good. Because if you freeze, if you hesitate, if you miss, people die. My people. Understand? I understand. Hendricks raised his hand. Senior Chief, with all respect, are we sure about this? Quinn's never been in combat. Putting her in Overwatch on a live op seems like my decision, Dalton cut him off. She earned the position. She'll fill it. Unless you want to challenge my judgment, petty officer? Hendricks' jaw worked, but he said nothing. Didn't think so. We leave at 2200 hours. Get some rest. Dismissed. The team filed out. Alara started to follow, but Dalton's voice stopped her. Quinn, a word. She turned back. The room was empty now except for the two of them. Dalton walked to the window, looking out at the mountains beyond the wire. You know why I'm putting you on this mission? Because I won the competition, Senior Chief. No. He turned to face her. I'm putting you on this mission because you need to see what it's really like. Not a range, not a drill, the real thing. Blood and noise and chaos. And you need to find out if you can handle it. I can handle it. Maybe. Or maybe you'll freeze up the first time someone shoots back. It happens. Good shooters, talented shooters, who just can't make the jump from paper targets to human beings. His voice softened slightly. There's no shame in it if that happens. But I need to know now, before we get into a situation where your inability to pull the trigger gets someone killed. Alara felt something cold settle in her stomach. You think I can't do it? I think you're 19 years old and you've never killed anyone. That's not an insult. It's a fact. And facts matter in this business. He moved closer, his voice dropping. Listen to me. When the moment comes, when you have a human being in your crosshairs, your brain is going to do everything it can to stop you from pulling that trigger. It's going to remind you that this is someone's son, someone's brother, maybe someone's father. It's going to show you their face, their eyes, their humanity. And you're going to have to kill them anyway. Can you do that? The question hung in the air between them. Alara thought about lying, about saying yes with confidence she didn't feel. But Dalton would see through it. I don't know, she said finally, but I guess we'll find out. Dalton nodded slowly. Honest answer. Good. He walked past her toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The guys giving you shit, Hendricks especially, that's not personal. Not really. They're testing you because in 3 days their lives might depend on you. They need to know you won't break, so when they push, you push back. Show them you belong, or don't, and go home. Either way, decide before we load that helicopter. Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone with the maps and the weight of what was coming. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Weapons checks, gear inspections, rehearsals of the insertion and extraction protocols. Alara threw herself into it, memorizing every detail, every contingency. At night, alone in her bunk, she couldn't sleep. She kept seeing it in her head, the moment Dalton had described. A person in her crosshairs. A real person, not a target. Could she pull the trigger? She didn't know. The night before the mission, she was doing a final check on her rifle when Ortiz found her. You good? He asked, sitting down on the adjacent bunk. Yeah, just nervous. Good. You should be. Means you're taking it seriously. He watched her work for a moment. Can I give you some advice? Sure. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to be tough. Just do your job, exactly like you've been trained. Emotion gets people killed out there. Hesitation gets people killed. Just be mechanical about it. See the threat, assess, engage. Simple as that. Is it really that simple? No, Ortiz admitted. But pretending it is helps. Trust me. Alara set down the cleaning rod, looking at him. Have you ever killed someone? He said it matter-of-factly. Yeah, twice. First time I threw up after. Second time, I didn't. That's what scared me more. That it got easier. That's the part they don't tell you in training. It's not the killing that haunts you. It's how normal it starts to feel. A chill ran down Alara's spine. Sorry, Ortiz said. Probably not what you wanted to hear the night before your first mission. No, I appreciate the honesty. He stood up, heading for the door. Get some sleep if you can. And Quinn, for what it's worth, I think you're going to do fine. You've got something most of these guys don't. What's that? You don't assume you're the smartest person in the room. You listen, you learn. That's worth more than all the bravado in the world. After he left, Alara lay back on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. 24 hours from now, she'd be in those mountains, in the dark, with a rifle and a decision to make. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine it, tried to prepare herself. But there was no preparing for what was coming. Well, in 2,200 hours. The helicopter was a MH-60 Blackhawk, rotors already spinning when the team arrived. The pilots didn't waste time with small talk. This was a routine insertion for them, one of dozens they'd flown. For Alara, it was anything but routine. She climbed aboard, taking her position near the door. The seat harness felt too tight, or maybe that was just her chest constricting with anxiety. Around her, the other operators settled in with practiced ease, checking weapons, adjusting gear, making last-minute radio checks. Hendrik sat directly across from her. He hadn't spoken to her since the competition, hadn't even acknowledged her existence. Now, as the helicopter lifted off, he leaned forward slightly. "Stay out of the way," he said, loud enough to be heard over the rotors. "We don't need you playing, hero." Alara didn't respond, just checked her rifle for the 20th time. The flight was 40 minutes of darkness and noise. Through the open door, she could see the landscape below, shadow and starlight, the occasional light from a distant village. It looked peaceful from up here, like the war was happening somewhere else. 15 minutes out, Dalton moved through the cabin, checking each person's gear with quick, efficient movements. When he got to Alara, he paused. "You ready?" he mouthed. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He squeezed her shoulder once, a gesture that might have been encouragement or might have been a final check that she was real, then moved on. 10 minutes out. The crew chief held up 10 fingers. Alara's heart was hammering now. She forced herself to breathe slowly, deeply, like she'd been trained. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Control what you can control. 5 minutes. The helicopter began its descent, and that's when Alara saw it. Through the door, in the moonlight, a section of the landing zone looked wrong. The ground had a different texture, a subtle displacement of dirt that didn't match the surrounding terrain. Disturbed earth. Fresh. Deliberate. Her training kicked in before her conscious mind could catch up. She'd seen photos of IED placements in countless briefings. The telltale signs of buried explosives, and they were about to land right on top of one. "Wait," she shouted, fumbling for the radio. "LZ is compromised. There's a..." The pilot's voice crackled through the comm. "Say again? You're breaking up." "Abort!" Alara screamed. "The LZ is rigged." For a terrible moment, nothing happened. The helicopter continued its descent, seconds from touchdown. Then Dalton was there, grabbing the radio from her hand, his voice cutting through the chaos with absolute authority. "Break off! Break off! LZ is hot! Repeat, LZ is hot!" The pilot reacted instantly, pulling hard on the collective. The helicopter lurched sideways, rotors screaming, everyone inside thrown against their harnesses. They touched down 200 meters from the original LZ in a cloud of dust and adrenaline. Silence. Then controlled chaos as the team deployed, spreading out in defensive positions, expecting contact. But there was nothing. Just darkness and the fading whine of the helicopter as it departed. Dalton keyed his radio. "All teams, report." One by one, they checked in. No casualties. No contact. Then he looked at Alara, his expression unreadable in the green glow of night vision. "What did you see?" "Disturbed Earth, Senior Chief. Southwest corner of the original LZ. Pattern consistent with buried ordnance." Dalton motioned to 2 of the Rangers. "Check it." They moved out, low and fast. 5 minutes later, the radio crackled. "Senior Chief, we got a full IED complex here. Pressure plates, directional charges, the works. Would have taken out the whole bird." The silence that followed was deafening. Hendrik stood up from his position, looking at Alara. His face was impossible to read, but when he spoke, his voice had changed. "Good eyes, Quinn." It wasn't an apology, wasn't gratitude, just an acknowledgement of fact. But coming from him, it was everything. Dalton's voice cut through the moment. "Stow it. We've got a mission to complete, and now we're 200 meters off our planned route. Quinn, you just bought yourself a longer walk. Hope those little legs can keep up." But there was something different in his voice now, too. A note of, was that respect? They moved out in single file, weapons up, night vision painting the world in shades of green. Alara took her position in the middle of the formation, her rifle feeling both familiar and foreign at the same time. She'd just saved their lives. But the mission hadn't even started yet, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, the enemy was waiting, because that IED complex hadn't placed itself. Someone had known they were coming. Someone had been ready. The approach took 2 hours through terrain that seemed designed to break ankles. Rocky slopes, hidden ravines, terrain that looked solid until you stepped on it and discovered it was just loose scree waiting to slide. Alara kept pace, refusing to show weakness even when her legs screamed and her lungs burned. Around her, the operators moved with practiced silence, communicating with hand signals and night vision. They reached the primary observation point at 0130 hours, a rocky outcrop with clear sight lines to the target compound 600 meters below. Dalton assigned positions. Hendricks, you're on point. Martinez, secure R6. Quinn, he pointed to a position slightly elevated from the main group. Up there. You've got overwatch and our radio relay in case we need to call in support. Stay alert. This valley's known for enemy spotters. Alara climbed to her assigned position, settling in behind a cluster of rocks that provided cover while maintaining sight lines. From here, she could see the entire compound, a collection of mud brick buildings arranged around a central courtyard. And there, in the middle of it all, lights still burning. Someone was awake. She keyed her radio, voice barely a whisper. I've got activity in the compound, multiple heat signatures. Confirmed, Dalton responded. We're seeing it too. Intel said this place would be minimal security. Something's off. Below, she watched through her scope as figures moved between buildings. Too many figures. This wasn't a skeleton crew. This was an active operation. Senior Chief, she whispered. I count at least 20 combatants, and they're armed. Heavy weapons. Copy that. Dalton's voice was tight. Everyone hold position. We're shifting to surveillance only. Do not engage unless... A light flared in the compound, then another. Within seconds, the entire valley was illuminated by spotlights. They'd been spotted. Contact, someone yelled, and the night exploded into chaos. Muzzle flashes erupted from the compound. Rounds cracked past Alara's position, striking rock with sharp impacts. Below, the team was already moving, falling back to secondary positions under covering fire. Quinn, Dalton's voice. We need suppressing fire on that southwest corner. 2 shooters with an RPK. Alara's hands moved on autopilot, finding the position, acquiring the target. 2 men with a machine gun, firing in controlled bursts. This was it. The moment Dalton had warned her about. Human beings, real people, in her crosshairs. Her finger froze on the trigger. Below, one of the Rangers took a hit, spinning and going down. His scream cut through the radio traffic. Quinn, Dalton roared. Engage! She squeezed. The rifle bucked. Through the scope, she saw the first shooter's head snap back. No hesitation this time. She shifted to the second target, fired again. Both men down. And she felt nothing. Just the mechanical process of working the bolt, acquiring the next threat. Ortiz had been right. The emotion would come later. Good kill, Dalton confirmed. Now get down here. We're pulling back to the rally point. Alara started to move, and that's when she saw them. Dozens of fighters pouring out of buildings that should have been empty. This wasn't a Taliban staging ground. This was a fortress, and they'd walked right into it. Senior Chief, she transmitted, we've got... The RPG streaked across the valley like a comet, impacting the cliff face where the main team had taken cover. The explosion lit up the night, and when the dust cleared, Alara could see bodies scattered on the slope. Moving. Some of them were still moving, but they were pinned down now, taking fire from 3 sides, with wounded slowing them down. Dalton's voice came through, strained. All units, break contact and evac to Rally Point Alpha. Quinn, provide cover, and then get the hell out. That's an order. But from her elevated position, Alara could see what Dalton couldn't. The route to the rally point was cut off. A squad of fighters was already moving to flank them, closing the trap. If the team ran now, they'd be slaughtered. She had one choice, one chance to shift the equation, and it meant directly disobeying orders. Alara settled back into her rifle, finding her first target at 800 meters. a fighter carrying another RPG, preparing to fire. She squeezed the trigger and chose combat over obedience. The RPG carrier dropped before he could fire, the rocket launcher clattering against stone as his body crumpled. Alara was already moving to the next target, a spotter with a radio, calling in their position. Center mass. He went down mid-transmission. "Quinn, what the hell are you doing?" Dalton's voice crackled through her earpiece, sharp with anger and something else. Fear, maybe. "I gave you an order." She didn't answer, couldn't answer. Her world had narrowed to the scope, the crosshairs, the rhythm of breath and trigger pull, mathematics and muscle memory. Nothing else. Another target, a fighter positioning a PKM machine gun on a rooftop. Distance, 950 meters. Wind, gusting left to right at approximately 8 knots. She adjusted, fired. The gun went silent. Below, she could see the team starting to move again, using the suppression she was providing to break contact. But the flanking squad was still coming, working their way up the slope through dead ground she couldn't cover from her current position. "Senior Chief," she transmitted, keeping her voice level even as her heart tried to punch through her ribs. "You've got 8 hostiles moving on your 6 o'clock, using the ravine as cover. I can't get an angle from here." "Copy." Dalton's breathing was labored. "We see them. Martinez, Hendricks set up a kill box at the ravine exit. Everyone else, keep moving." Alara watched through her scope as the trap was laid. The enemy fighters emerged from the ravine right into a crossfire. It was over in seconds. Brutal, efficient, necessary. But more were coming. The compound had emptied like a kicked anthill, and now dozens of fighters were spreading across the valley floor, moving with a coordination that spoke of training and discipline. This wasn't some ragtag militia. These were professionals. "How many?" It was Hendrick's voice, tight with controlled aggression. "Too many," Dalton responded. "Air support is 15 minutes out. We need to survive that long." 15 minutes. An eternity in combat. Alara scanned the battlefield, looking for threats, priorities, angles of attack. Her position was good for long-range work, but if the enemy got close to the team's location, she'd be useless. Worse than useless, isolated and alone on a hilltop with no support. A burst of automatic fire raked her position, forcing her to duck behind cover. Rock chips stung her face. When she looked again, she spotted the shooter, dug in behind a low wall 600 meters out, methodically working the team's positions. She lined up the shot, compensated for a slight upward angle, and fired. Miss. High and left. The shooter adjusted, sending another burst toward the team. One of the Rangers cried out. Alara forced herself to slow down, to not rush. Checked her dope, recalculated. The wind had shifted slightly. She adjusted her hold. Second shot. The shooter slumped forward. "Nice," someone breathed over the radio. Maybe Ortiz, but the wounded Ranger, she could see him now through the scope, lying in the open, clutching his leg. Blood, dark and wet, soaking through his pants. The rest of the team was pinned down, unable to reach him without exposing themselves to fire from the compound. The Ranger's name was Collins, 23 years old. He'd shown her how to properly pack a ruck her second day at the FOB, had shared his instant coffee when hers ran out. Now he was bleeding out on an Afghan mountainside, and she was the only one who could help. "Collins is hit bad," she transmitted. "I'm moving to—" "Negative," Dalton cut her off. "You stay in position. That's an order, Corporal." "Senior Chief, he's going to bleed out if—" "I said stay in position. You're doing more good providing overwatch than you would playing medic." Alara watched through her scope as Collins tried to drag himself toward cover. His movements were getting weaker, slower. She made a choice. "I'm sorry, Senior Chief. I can't follow that order." She was moving before Dalton could respond, leaving her elevated position, scrambling down the rocky slope with her rifle slung across her back. Loose stone shifted under her boots. She half ran, half slid down the hillside, using whatever cover she could find. Bullets cracked past her head. She didn't slow down. Collins was 30 meters away when she saw the fighter emerge from behind a boulder, AK-47 raising toward the wounded Ranger's back. Alara dropped to one knee, bringing her rifle up in a single fluid motion. No time for careful aim, no time for calculations. Pure instinct, she fired. The fighter went down, but his weapon discharged as he fell, round stitching across the ground inches from Collins. Then she was there, sliding into cover beside the ranger, her hands already moving to assess his wound. Femoral hit. Bad. The tourniquet was going to hurt like hell, but it would keep him alive. "Stay with me, Collins," she said, pulling the CAT tourniquet from her kit. "You're going to be fine." "That's bullshit," he gasped, his face pale and slick with sweat. "But I appreciate the effort." She cinched the tourniquet tight. Collins screamed, back arching, but the bleeding slowed, stopped. "Can you move?" "Think so. Just give me a second to remember how legs work." Bullets impacted the rock above them. They were exposed here, caught between the compound and the team's position with no good options. Alara keyed her radio. "I've got Collins. He's stabilized but can't move fast. We need cover to get back to your position." "Stand by," Dalton responded. Then, his voice shifted to the command frequency. "All units, I need suppressing fire on the compound. Everything you've got. Quinn's bringing Collins home." The world erupted. The entire team opened up simultaneously, pouring fire into the compound and any position that might hold a shooter. It wouldn't last long, they'd burn through ammunition fast. But it gave Alara the window she needed. "Move," she told Collins, hauling him up, taking most of his weight on her shoulders. He was a big guy, easily 190 pounds, and her legs nearly buckled under the load. They moved. Collins hopping on one leg, Alara half carrying him, both of them exposed and vulnerable. The 50 meters to the team's position felt like 50 miles. A round snapped past her ear, so close she felt the displacement of air. Then hands were grabbing them, pulling them into cover. Martinez and another ranger dragging them behind the rocks where the rest of the team had taken shelter. Alara collapsed against the stone, gasping for air, her legs trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Dalton loomed over her, his face furious. "What part of stay in position was unclear, Corporal?" "The part where I was supposed to watch a teammate die, Senior Chief." "You could have gotten yourself killed. You could have gotten Collins killed. You could have compromised the entire team." "But I didn't." Alara met his eyes, refusing to look away. "He's alive. I'm alive. We're all still in this fight." For a long moment, Dalton just stared at her. Then he turned away, keying his radio. "Air support. What's your ETA?" 12 minutes, the pilot responded. "We're coming in hot." "Not fast enough." Dalton scanned the battlefield. The enemy was regrouping, preparing for another push. "We're going to be overrun before then unless we can change the dynamic. We need to thin their numbers." Hendricks spoke up. "There's a truck in the compound courtyard. Looks like a technical, heavy gun mounted in the bed. If they get that thing operational, we're done." Alara pulled herself up to look. He was right. She could see fighters working on the truck, trying to get the engine started. Once they got that .50 caliber mobile, it would shred their position. "I can take it," she said. "From here?" Hendricks looked skeptical. "That's what, 1,200 meters? Through multiple heat sources, creating mirage? No way you make that shot." "I can make it. She can make it," Dalton said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "I've seen what she can do. If she says she can make the shot, she can make it." Coming from him, it was better than a medal. Alara set up her rifle, using a flat rock as a rest. Through the scope, she could see the truck clearly. The fighters were still working on it, the engine coughing and sputtering but not catching. She ran the calculations. Distance, wind, temperature gradient from the valley floor to her position. The mirage was murder, heat waves rippling up from the compound, distorting everything. But there was a pattern, always a pattern. She watched the shimmer, learning its rhythm, saw the moment of clarity between pulses. "Firing," she whispered. The rifle kicked. For an eternal second, nothing happened. Then the truck's hood exploded, the engine block shattering. The fighters scattered, diving for cover. "Holy shit," someone breathed. But Alara was already looking for the next target. A commander, she thought, based on how the other fighters oriented toward him. Taking orders, looking for direction. She put him down. Chaos rippled through the enemy formation. Without coordination, their attack faltered. Fighters took cover, stopped advancing. "Air support, 5 minutes," the radio crackled. "We might actually make it," Ortiz said from his position near the radio equipment. That's when the mortar round hit. The explosion was close enough to lift Alara off the ground and slam her back down, her ears ringing, her vision swimming. Dirt and rocks rained down. Someone was screaming. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond properly. Everything felt disconnected, like her brain was sending signals that her limbs weren't receiving. Hands grabbed her, dragging her. Hendricks, she realized dimly. He was pulling her deeper into cover, yelling something she couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. Another mortar round, then another. They'd zeroed in on the team's position, and now they were walking the impacts across the hillside. Dalton's voice cut through the chaos, steady and calm, despite everything. "We can't stay here. They've got our range. We move to the secondary position now. Grab the wounded and go." They moved as a unit, covering each other, dragging the casualties. Alara's hearing was starting to come back, replaced by a high-pitched whine that made thinking difficult. But she could move again, could function. The secondary position was a cluster of boulders further up the slope, with better cover but worse sightlines. They stumbled into it just as another mortar barrage hit their former position. "Head count," Dalton barked. They were all there. Battered, some wounded, but alive. Colin sat propped against a rock, his face gray but his eyes alert. "Thanks for the pickup," he said to Alara, his voice weak but steady. "Thank me when we're back at the FOB." "Deal." Hendricks was checking his ammunition. "I'm down to 3 mags." Similar reports came in from the others. They'd burned through most of their ammo in the initial contact and the fighting retreat. If the enemy mounted another serious push before air support arrived, they'd be in trouble. Alara checked her own supply. 4 rounds left in her current magazine plus 2 full spares. Not much for a sniper who'd been shooting constantly for, she checked her watch, 20 minutes. It felt like hours. "Air support, 2 minutes," Ortiz reported. "About damn time," Martinez muttered. But 2 minutes in combat is an eternity, and the enemy knew air support was coming. They'd be making their move now or never. Sure enough, Alara spotted movement. Not another frontal assault, though. Something smarter. "Senior Chief, they're splitting up, some heading for the high ground on our left, others circling right. They're trying to get above us." Dalton swore. "If they get elevation, we're sitting ducks. Hendricks, Martinez, take 3 men and stop that left flank. The rest of us will hold here and deal with the right." The team split, moving with practiced efficiency despite their exhaustion and wounds. Alara stayed with Dalton's group, setting up to cover the right approach. Through her scope, she could see them coming. 8 fighters, moving fast, using cover well. Professional tactics. She took the point man first. He went down, and the others immediately scattered, taking cover. Good discipline. "They're adapting to you," Dalton observed. "Won't cluster up, won't expose themselves unnecessarily. This is going to get harder." He was right. The next shot took her 15 seconds to line up, and even then it was a hasty shot that only winged the target. The fighters were advancing by bounds now, one covering while another moved, slow but steady, and Alara's ammunition was running out. 3 rounds left in the magazine, 2 full magazines remaining. "Senior Chief, I'm running low on ammo." "Copy. Make them count." She forced herself to slow down, to be selective. Only took shots she was certain of. Distance was still on her side. They had to cross open ground to reach the team's position, and every meter they advanced put them more clearly in her crosshairs. 2 down, 1 wounded, and out of the fight. Magazine change. Smooth, practiced, fast. The remaining fighters had gone to ground, pinned by her fire. But that meant they weren't advancing, weren't threatening the team. A stalemate. Then the sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the valley. The air support had arrived. An Apache gunship crested the ridge, its targeting systems painting the battlefield with invisible lasers. The pilot's voice came through on the team frequency. "Ground element, mark your position with IR strobes. All hostiles are weapons free." Dalton tossed an infrared strobe into the open. Through night vision, it would shine like a beacon, marking friendly forces. The Apache's 30mm chain gun opened up with a sound like thunder, each round the size of a Coke can, each one capable of ripping through concrete. The compound disintegrated under the barrage. Secondary explosions bloomed, ammunition cooking off, fuel igniting. The fighters who'd been advancing on the team's position broke and ran, abandoning the attack. It was over in 90 seconds. The Apache made another pass, ensuring no threats remained, then circled overhead in a protective orbit. Ground element, you're clear for extraction, the pilot reported. Your ride's inbound. ETA 3 minutes. Alara sagged against the rocks, the adrenaline draining out of her all at once, leaving behind exhaustion so profound she wasn't sure she could stand. Dalton moved through the team, checking on each person, assessing wounds, making decisions. When he got to Alara, he crouched down beside her. You disobeyed 2 direct orders tonight, he said quietly. Yes, Senior Chief. Could have gotten yourself killed. Could have gotten others killed. Yes, Senior Chief. And you saved Collins's life. Probably saved all our lives with that Overwatch position you refused to abandon. Alara didn't know what to say to that. Dalton stood up, offering his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. We'll talk about this back at base, he said. But for now, good work. Damn good work. The extraction helicopter arrived, a beautiful sight in the pre-dawn darkness. They loaded the wounded first. Collins, 2 others with shrapnel wounds, 1 with a concussion from the mortar attack. Alara climbed aboard last, collapsing into a seat near the door. As the helicopter lifted off, she looked back at the valley. Fire still burned in the compound, casting flickering light across the mountainside. Somewhere down there, people had died tonight. People she'd killed. She waited for the emotion Ortiz had warned her about. The guilt, the horror, the weight of taking human life. But all she felt was numb and tired. So tired. Hendricks sat across from her, his face streaked with dirt and dried blood from a cut above his eye. He was looking at her with an expression she'd never seen from him before. You're full of surprises, Quinn, he said, pitching his voice loud enough to be heard over the rotors. Didn't have much choice. There's always a choice. You chose right. He leaned his head back against the vibrating wall of the helicopter. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. You belong here. It wasn't an apology exactly, but coming from Hendricks, it was close enough. The flight back to FOB Viper took 40 minutes. Alara spent most of it staring out at the landscape below, watching as darkness slowly gave way to the gray light of dawn. They touched down just as the sun broke over the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Medical personnel rushed to meet the helicopter, triaging the wounded, getting them to the aid station. Alara climbed out on unsteady legs. Every muscle ached. Her shoulder throbbed where the rifle's recoil had bruised it. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline had worn off. Quinn, Dalton's voice stopped her. Debrief in 1 hour. Get some food, get cleaned up. But be ready to walk through everything that happened. Intel's going to want details about that compound. It shouldn't have been that heavily fortified. Yes, Senior Chief. She started toward the barracks, but Ortiz intercepted her halfway there. Hey. He looked her over, concerned. You okay? I killed people tonight, she said, the words coming out flat and emotionless. Yeah, you did. I don't feel anything about it. Ortiz nodded slowly. That's normal. Or as normal as anything gets in this line of work. The feelings might come later. Or they might not. Everyone processes it differently. Does that make me a bad person? That I don't feel bad about it? No. His voice was firm. It makes you someone who did what needed to be done to keep your team alive. That's not something to feel guilty about. Alara wanted to believe him, but the numbness persisted, cold and heavy in her chest. In the barracks, she stripped off her gear and noticed for the first time that her uniform was torn in several places, stained with dirt and blood. Some of it hers, some of it Collins's. Her hands were scraped raw from the climb down to his position. The shower water ran brown with dust and grime. She stood under the lukewarm spray, letting it wash away the physical evidence of the night. But the memories remained, sharp and clear. The face of the first person she'd killed. She could still see him through the scope, the moment the round hit, the way he'd fallen. She should feel something about that. Shouldn't she? But there was only the numbness, and underneath it, a quiet certainty that she'd do it all again if she had to. The debrief was held in the same plywood conference room where they'd received the mission brief, but the atmosphere was different now, heavier. The intelligence officer was a captain named Morrison, rail-thin and intense, with eyes that never seemed to blink. He had photographs spread across the table, satellite imagery of the compound, both before and after the Apache's gun run. Walk me through it, he said without preamble. From the moment you spotted the IED to the moment you got on that extraction bird. every detail. Alara did, her voice steady and professional. She described the disturbed Earth pattern, the unexpected activity in the compound, the number and disposition of enemy fighters, their tactics and discipline. Morrison listened without interrupting, making notes. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. According to our intelligence, that compound was supposed to be a minor Taliban waypoint, maybe 6 to 8 fighters max. You're saying you counted at least 40 before the airstrike? Yes, sir, probably more. They had heavy weapons, mortars, coordinated tactics. These weren't local militia. They were trained. Which raises the question, Dalton interjected, of how our intelligence was that far off, and how they knew we were coming in time to set up that IED. Morrison's expression darkened. We're looking into that. There are several possibilities, none of them good. You think someone tipped them off? Hendricks asked. I think we had intelligence that was either outdated, deliberately falsified, or compromised in transmission. Until we know which, we're suspending operations in this sector. A murmur went through the room. Suspending operations meant they'd lost the initiative, let the enemy regroup. How long? Dalton asked. Until we can verify our sources and plug whatever leak allowed this to happen. Could be days, could be weeks. Morrison started gathering his photographs. In the meantime, you all get some downtime. Rest up. You've earned it. The meeting broke up. Alara stood to leave, but Morrison called her back. Corporal Quinn, a moment. She waited while the others filed out. Morrison studied her with those unblinking eyes. That was impressive shooting last night. The after-action reports indicate you engaged and neutralized at least 9 hostiles at ranges exceeding 800 meters in adverse conditions while under fire. That's exceptional work. Thank you, sir. It's also raised some flags. Your file says you've only been with the unit for 3 weeks. This was your first combat deployment, yet you performed at a level that typically takes years of experience to achieve. He paused. Where did you train before this? Alara felt something cold settle in her stomach. Advanced Marksmanship School at Fort Benning, sir. Standard sniper qualification course. Right, which produces good shooters, not great ones. Certainly not ones capable of what you did last night. Morrison leaned forward slightly. So I'll ask again. Where did you really train? That's where I trained, sir. I don't know what else to tell you. Morrison watched her for another long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, Corporal, dismissed. Alara walked out, her heart pounding. She'd told the truth. Fort Benning was where she'd officially trained. What she hadn't mentioned was the 3 years before that, spent on her grandfather's ranch in Montana, learning to read wind and distance under the tutelage of a man who'd been one of the best snipers in Vietnam. But that was personal history, not relevant to her current service, or so she told herself. Outside the conference room, she found the rest of the team gathered near the barracks. They'd clearly been waiting for her. Everything okay? Ortiz asked. Yeah, Morrison just had some follow-up questions. Guy gives me the creeps, Martinez said. Intelligence types always do. Never trust someone whose job is to know everyone's secrets. Hendricks was watching Alara with a thoughtful expression. You handled yourself pretty well in there, kept your cool under pressure. Thanks. I mean it. A lot of rookies would have frozen up when Morrison started pushing, but you didn't even blink. He tilted his head slightly. Makes me wonder what else you're not telling us. The words hung in the air, not quite an accusation, but close. There's nothing to tell, Alara said evenly. I'm just a shooter trying to do her job. Right. Hendricks didn't sound convinced, but he let it drop. Well, whoever you are, you saved our asses last night, so I guess the rest doesn't matter. They dispersed after that, each finding their own way to process what had happened. Alara returned to her bunk, intending to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the battlefield, heard the crack of rounds passing close, felt the recoil of her rifle as she took shot after shot. She'd crossed a line tonight, become something different than what she'd been before. A killer. The word should have bothered her more than it did. Instead, all she could think about was how natural it had felt. How right. And that scared her more than anything else that had happened. 3 days passed in a fog of routine. Equipment maintenance, physical training, waiting. The investigation into the compromised intelligence dragged on, and the team remained grounded, forbidden from running operations until Morrison and his people figured out who'd sold them out. Alara should have been grateful for the downtime. Her body needed it. The bruises were spectacular now, purple and yellow across her shoulder, her ribs, anywhere the rifle or the ground had made hard contact. But rest just gave her too much time to think, and thinking led back to the same place every time. That cold certainty when she'd pulled the trigger. The absence of hesitation. The way killing had felt less like crossing a moral boundary and more like solving a complex equation. She was cleaning her rifle for the third time that day when Ortiz found her. "You're going to wear the rifling smooth if you keep that up," he said, dropping onto the adjacent bunk. "Just staying sharp." "Right, because that's what this is about." He watched her work for a moment. "You know, most people after their first firefight either can't stop talking about it or won't talk about it at all. You're doing both somehow." Alara didn't look up from the bolt she was inspecting. "I'm fine." "That's what worries me. Nobody who's actually fine says they're fine that many times." Ortiz leaned forward. "Look, I'm not trying to be your therapist or whatever, but I've seen what happens when people bottle this stuff up. It doesn't go away, it just waits." "What do you want me to say? That I'm traumatized? That I can't sleep?" She set down the bolt, finally meeting his eyes. "I sleep fine, Ortiz. Better than I have in weeks, and that's what scares me." Before he could respond, the door banged open. Martinez stuck his head in. "Quinn, Dalton wants you. Conference room, now." Alara exchanged a glance with Ortiz, then grabbed her uniform top and headed out. The conference room held more people than she expected. Dalton, Morrison, 2 officers she didn't recognize, and a civilian in khakis and a polo shirt who had contractor written all over him. "Corporal Quinn, reporting as ordered, Senior Chief." Dalton gestured to a chair. "Sit. We have a situation." Morrison took over, pulling up a map on the laptop connected to the room's single projector. 4 hours ago, we intercepted radio traffic indicating a high-value target has been spotted in Sector 7. American hostage, civilian contractor captured 3 weeks ago during a supply convoy ambush. The civilian leaned forward. "Robert Keene, structural engineer working on a school construction project in Kandahar province. Married, 2 kids. He's been off the grid since the 23rd of last month. Intel says he's being held here." Morrison indicated a point on the map, a village complex in a narrow valley surrounded by steep terrain. "Problem is, our sources say he's being moved tonight. We have a 6-hour window, maybe less, to extract him before he disappears into Pakistan." "So we go get him," Alara said. "What's the issue?" "The issue," one of the unknown officers said, a major, judging by his insignia, "is that we don't have the resources for a full-scale rescue operation in that time frame. The Ranger platoon that would normally handle this is engaged in Helmand. SEAL Team 6 is on another op. Everyone who could do this properly is somewhere else." "Which brings us to you," Morrison said, looking at Alara. "We need a small team, fast, light, surgical. Get in, confirm the target, eliminate resistance, extract the hostage." "We've done hostage rescue before," Dalton interjected. "But never with a team this small, never on this short notice, and never in terrain like this." He pulled up a satellite photo. "Single access road, heavily watched, high ground on all sides. It's a natural choke point. Anyone going in that way is walking into a shooting gallery." The major nodded. "That's why we need an alternate approach. There's a goat path on the eastern ridge, accessible only on foot, that leads down to the village. Steep as hell, treacherous in the dark, but it would put a small team above the enemy positions." Alara studied the satellite imagery. The ridge was nearly vertical in places, a 1,000-foot drop to the valley floor. One slip and you'd fall to your death before you could scream. "Who'd you have in mind for the team?" Dalton asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. 4 operators, Morrison said. "You, Hendricks, Martinez, and Quinn." "Why Quinn?" The major asked the question like it had been bothering him. "No offense, Corporal, but you're the least experienced person in this room. Why not bring another seasoned operator?" "Because she's the best shooter we have," Dalton said flatly. "And because the overwatch position for this operation is going to be approximately 1,400 meters from the target building on unstable footing in variable wind conditions. I've seen what Quinn can do. She makes shots other people can't even attempt." The major didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue further. Morrison continued the briefing. "You'll insert via helicopter at the base of the ridge at 2100 hours. Climb to the overwatch position here." He indicated a rocky outcrop. "While the assault element approaches the village, Quinn provides overwatch and engages any threats that could compromise the rescue. Once the hostage is secured, everyone extracts back up the ridge to a secondary LZ here. And if the hostage is already gone when we get there? Hendrick's voice came from the doorway. He'd arrived late, still pulling on his gear. Then you abort and extract. No heroics, no deviations. This is a precision operation, not a war. Morrison's eyes swept the room. Questions? Alara raised her hand. What's the expected enemy's strength? Unknown. Could be a handful of guards, could be a full squad. Intel's been unreliable lately. The way Morrison said it suggested the investigation into the compromised intelligence was ongoing and not going well. Wonderful, Martinez muttered. You have 2 hours to prep, the major said, standing. Wheels up at 20:30. Make them count. The meeting broke up. Alara followed Dalton out, catching up to him in the hallway. Senior Chief, can I ask you something? He stopped, turned. Make it quick. Why me? Really, you could have requested another operator from a different unit, someone with more experience. Dalton was quiet for a moment, studying her face. You want the truth? Yes, Senior Chief. Because you don't hesitate. I've been doing this for 15 years, Quinn. I've worked with dozens of snipers, some of them legendary. And you know what separates the good ones from the great ones? It's not marksmanship, it's not knowledge or training. It's the ability to make the shot when it matters, without second-guessing, without freezing up. You've got that. I saw it 3 nights ago. He paused. I also think you're holding something back, some piece of your story that doesn't quite add up, but right now I don't care what it is. I care that when I need someone to put a round exactly where it needs to go, you can do it. That's all that matters. He walked away before she could respond. 2 hours later, Alara stood on the tarmac watching the sun sink toward the horizon, her gear checked and rechecked, her rifle cleaned and zeroed. The helicopter, a different bird this time, a smaller MH-6 Little Bird, sat waiting, rotors already turning. Hendricks approached, carrying his own kit. The animosity from their first meeting had faded, replaced by something closer to professional respect. You ready for this? He asked. As ready as I'm going to be. That ridge is no joke. I've done some climbing, but this is going to be technical. One mistake and you're not bouncing. You're paced. Thanks for the pep talk, he grinned, just keeping it real. But hey, you've surprised me before. Maybe you'll do it again. Martinez joined them, followed by Dalton carrying a radio pack and additional medical supplies. Listen up, Dalton said, his voice cutting through the rotor noise. This is different from the last op. Smaller team, higher stakes, zero margin for error. We go in quiet. We stay quiet. We get out quiet. Quinn, you're our ace in the hole. Anything goes sideways, we're counting on you to even the odds. Understood, Senior Chief. Good. Load up. The flight to the insertion point took 35 minutes. Alara spent it staring out at the darkening landscape, watching as villages became scattered lights, then shadows, then nothing. They were heading deep into territory where American forces rarely operated, where the Taliban moved freely and everyone was a potential threat. The Little Bird dropped them at the base of the ridge exactly on schedule, hovering just long enough for them to jump out before banking away into the night. The sound of the rotors faded, leaving only silence and the whisper of wind across stone. Dalton activated his night vision. Stack up, I'm on point, then Hendricks, Martinez, Quinn at the rear. Watch your footing. This climb's rated Class 4 in some sections. Class 4. That meant using hands and feet, exposed positions, serious consequences for a fall. They started climbing. The first 100 meters weren't terrible. Steep, but with enough hand and footholds that Alara could manage it even with her rifle and pack. But as they gained elevation, the path narrowed, the rock became looser, and the exposure increased. Alara's arms burned. Her legs trembled. The pack felt like it weighed twice what it had on flat ground, and the rifle kept catching on protrusions, trying to pull her off balance. Below there was nothing but darkness and the certainty of death if she slipped. She focused on the next hold, the next step, nothing else. Just the immediate problem in front of her. An hour into the climb, Martinez froze. Hold up, he whispered over the radio. Rock's unstable here. Give me a second. Alara pressed herself against the cliff face, her right foot on a ledge barely wide enough for her boot's toe. Her left hand jammed into a crack in the rock. Her fingers were starting to cramp. Clear, Martinez finally said. "But take it slow through this section." They continued. The ridge seemed endless, each section harder than the last. Twice, Alara nearly lost her grip. Both times, she caught herself through pure determination and spite. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was actually 90 minutes according to her watch, they reached the overwatch position. It was a flat section of rock about 10 feet across, with a clear view down into the valley. Through her night vision, Alara could see the village, a cluster of mud brick buildings arranged around a central square, lights in a few windows. Movement, though at this distance she couldn't make out details. "Quinn, set up here," Dalton ordered quietly. "Martinez, you're her security. Hendricks and I will move down to the assault position. Wait for my signal before engaging anything." "Copy." Dalton and Hendricks moved off, descending toward the village through dead ground that would keep them hidden from observers. Alara watched them go, then began setting up her rifle. Martinez took position behind her, scanning the valley through his own optics. "Hell of a view," he murmured. "Yeah." Alara settled in behind her scope, getting comfortable. The range to the village was 1,380 meters, according to her laser rangefinder. Wind was gusting from the west at approximately 10 knots. Temperature had dropped significantly with altitude, probably mid-40s now. She made her adjustments, then began scanning the village systematically, counting guards, noting positions, looking for threats. There, 2 men with AK-47s, walking a patrol route between buildings. Another on a rooftop, smoking a cigarette. A fourth near what looked like the largest structure, probably where the hostage was being held. "I count 4 sentries," she reported quietly. "All armed. 1 on elevated position." "Copy," Dalton responded. "We're in position. Stand by." Minutes crawled past. Alara kept scanning, her crosshairs moving from target to target, memorizing positions, calculating holdovers. Then Dalton's voice, barely a whisper. "We have eyes on the hostage. 2nd floor of the main building, northwestern corner room. 2 guards inside with him, 4 more downstairs. That's 10 total hostiles." Hendricks added, more than intel suggested. "Can you make the rescue?" Morrison's voice came through on the command frequency, transmitted from the TOC back at the FOB. A long pause. Then Dalton. "Not clean. We'd have to breach a defended building with an unknown number of hostiles and extract a civilian under fire. High probability of casualties." "What do you recommend?" Another pause. Alara could almost hear Dalton thinking through the options. "We need to reduce their numbers before we go in. Take out the sentries quietly, draw the inside guards out, thin the herd." "Negative," Morrison said. "Your orders are to avoid contact until absolutely necessary. This is a rescue op, not a combat mission." "With all due respect, sir, those orders are going to get us all killed." Dalton's voice had an edge now. "We need to control the situation before we breach, or we're walking into a meat grinder." "Your orders stand, Senior Chief. Find another way." The radio went silent. Alara could see the sentries still making their rounds, oblivious to the operators hidden in the darkness. "Senior Chief?" Hendricks prompted quietly. "Hold position," Dalton responded. "Let me think." But thinking time ran out faster than anyone expected. Movement in the village, hurried, urgent. Lights came on in multiple buildings. Voices raised in alarm. The sentries stopped their patrols, converging on the main building. "They're moving him," Martinez breathed. "Right now!" Through her scope, Alara watched as men emerged from the building, surrounding a figure in Western clothing. Robert Keene, stumbling, hands bound. They were loading him into a truck. "We've got maybe 90 seconds before that truck leaves," Hendricks said. "If it gets on that road, we'll never catch it." "Oh," Dalton's voice was tight. "Morrison, target is being moved. We need authorization to engage." "Negative. Hold your position. We're scrambling air assets. There's no time. They'll be gone before any aircraft can get here." "Your orders are to avoid—" "Screw the orders," Hendricks cut in. "We've got an American civilian about to disappear forever, and you're worried about avoiding contact?" "Maintain radio discipline, petty officer," Morrison snapped. "Senior Chief Dalton, you will hold position and await further instructions." Alara watched through her scope as they loaded Keene into the truck. The driver was getting in, starting the engine. 60 seconds. Dalton's breathing was audible over the radio, harsh and frustrated. The silence stretched. 45 seconds. Senior Chief, Alara said quietly, I can stop that truck. Quinn, I can stop it. The engine block, from here. Disable it without killing anyone. Give you time to reach the target. Morrison said, Morrison's not here. Alara's voice was steady, calm. You are. And you know what needs to happen. 30 seconds. The truck was moving now, pulling away from the building, heading for the road. 20 seconds. Dalton's voice when it came was barely audible. Take the shot. Alara's world narrowed to the scope. Wind had shifted slightly, now coming from northwest at 12 knots. Distance to moving target, 1,350 meters and increasing. Lead time, approximately 1.2 meters given current speed. The engine block was small, armored by the truck's body. She had maybe a 6-inch window to hit it in a way that would cause catastrophic failure. Mathematics. Wind. Distance. Motion. All of it flowing through her mind in a split second of calculation. She exhaled halfway, found the stillness between heartbeats. Squeezed. The rifle kicked. For an eternal moment, nothing happened. Then the truck's hood exploded in a geyser of steam and smoke. The vehicle lurched, coughed, died, rolled to a stop. Chaos erupted in the village. Men scattered, looking for the source of the shot. The 2 guards with Keen dragged him out of the truck, pulling him back toward the building. Assault element, move now! Dalton's voice had shifted into combat mode. Quinn, keep them pinned. Alara was already tracking targets. A fighter running toward a defensive position, center mass, down. Another bringing up an RPG. He dropped before he could shoulder the weapon. Below, she could see Dalton and Hendricks moving fast, closing the distance to the building under cover of her fire. But more fighters were emerging, way more. The village was emptying like a disturbed anthill. Contact left, Martinez called out, his rifle barking. We've got climbers coming up our position. Alara risked a glance over her shoulder. 3 fighters halfway up the ridge, moving with the agility of people who knew this terrain intimately. I've got the valley, she told Martinez. You handle them. She swung back to her scope. Dalton and Hendricks had reached the building, stacking up on the door, but the guards had dragged Keen inside, and now there was return fire coming from the windows. A muzzle flash from the 2nd floor. Alara tracked it, saw the shooter framed in the window, fired. The shooting stopped. Breaching, Dalton called. The door exploded inward, explosive charge, small and precise. Then the distinct sound of suppressed weapons. Dalton and Hendricks inside, clearing rooms with brutal efficiency. Behind Alara, Martinez's rifle cracked steadily. They keep coming. I dropped 2, but there's more. Alara scanned the valley. More fighters were responding now, converging on the building where Dalton and Hendricks were working. She started taking them down methodically, but there were too many coming from too many directions. We've got Keen, Hendricks transmitted. Moving to extract. Negative, Dalton overrode him. We're surrounded. Can't make it back to the ridge. Through her scope, Alara could see it was true. At least 20 fighters now, some taking cover, others advancing on the building. Dalton and Hendricks were trapped. Martinez, status? Dalton called. We've got our own problems. Estimate 6 hostiles climbing toward our position. Alara's mind raced. The assault team was pinned. Her position was about to be overrun. And there was one civilian in the middle of it all who'd die if this went wrong. Every option was bad, but some were less bad than others. Senior Chief, she said, her voice cutting through the radio chatter, I need you to get to the rooftop, all 3 of you, right now. We'll be exposed up there. I know, trust me. Just get to the roof and stay low. A pause. Then, moving. Alara swung her rifle, scanning the valley. She needed a force multiplier, something that would change the dynamic in one dramatic move. There, a technical truck, .50 caliber mounted in the bed, being driven toward the building. If it got into position, that gun would tear through the mud brick walls like paper. But the truck had something else, something better. Ammunition storage. She could see the crates in the truck bed stacked next to the gun. Distance, 1,420 meters. Wind, gusting, variable. Target, small, moving, surrounded by cover. This was impossible. No one made this shot, except she'd never believed in impossible, just improbable. She found her stillness, did the math, made adjustments that felt more like instinct than calculation. Fired. The round hit the ammunition crate's dead center. The explosion was massive, instant, catastrophic. The truck vaporized in a fireball that lit up the entire valley. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition cooked off, sending rounds ricocheting in every direction. The fighters near the truck were simply erased. The ones further out were thrown to the ground by the overpressure. Chaos turned to pandemonium. Holy shit! Martinez's voice was awed. Quinn, what the hell did you just do? Made an opening. Senior Chief, you've got maybe 30 seconds before they recover. Move now. She could see them on the rooftop, Dalton carrying Keene in a fireman's carry, Hendricks providing cover. They jumped down to an adjacent building, then another, working their way toward the edge of the village. Alara kept firing, picking off anyone who looked like they might recover quickly enough to be a threat. Her world had become scope and trigger, calculation and execution. Nothing else existed. A round cracked past her head, so close she felt the heat. Martinez! Little busy. His rifle was on full auto now, no longer trying for precision, just volume. The climbers had reached the base of their position. Alara made a decision. She rolled away from her rifle, yanking her sidearm, a Beretta M9, from its holster. The first fighter crested the ledge and she put 2 rounds in his chest from 6 feet away. He fell back, screaming. Another one appeared. She fired 3 times. He dropped. Her slide locked back. Empty. A third fighter pulled himself over the ledge, bringing up his AK-47. Martinez's boot caught him in the face, sending him backward off the cliff. His scream faded into the darkness below. Reload! Martinez yelled, still firing down at the remaining climbers. Alara slammed a fresh magazine home, her hand shaking now from adrenaline. Back to the rifle. Back to the scope. Dalton and Hendricks had made it to the edge of the village, but they were still taking fire. Still pinned. Quinn, we need an exit, Dalton transmitted. She scanned frantically. There. A small building on the eastern edge positioned between the assault team and Freedom. But it had fighters taking cover behind it, using it as a firing position. If she could collapse it, but that would mean shooting at a structure, bringing it down, with civilians possibly inside. She'd be trading enemy fighters for potentially innocent lives. The thought paralyzed her for half a second. Then she saw a fighter emerge from the building carrying ammunition. Just ammunition. It was a weapons cache, not a home. She aimed for the corner support, where mud brick met wooden beam. Fired. The support shattered. The building groaned. Second shot. Another support. The structure began to collapse, tilting, fighters scrambling to get clear. Third shot. The building came down in a cloud of dust and debris, blocking the line of fire from that position. Go, she transmitted. Dalton and Hendricks ran, Keene stumbling between them, rounds kicking up dirt at their feet. They made it to cover, then pushed forward again, using the collapsed building as concealment. We're clear of the village, Dalton reported, his breathing labored. Heading for the rally point. Copy, Alara responded. We'll cover your movement then. Grenade! Martinez screamed. Alara saw it bounce onto the ledge, saw Martinez dive away from it, saw the world compress into a single terrible instant. The explosion picked her up and threw her. She hit rock hard enough to see stars, her ears ringing so loud she couldn't hear anything else. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Something warm ran down her face. Blood, probably. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Everything hurt in a distant, disconnected way that meant shock was setting in. Through blurred vision, she saw a figure climbing onto the ledge. Not Martinez. Someone else. An enemy fighter, his AK-47 raised, searching for targets. He saw her. Their eyes met. Alara's right arm was pinned under her body. Her sidearm was somewhere in the darkness. Her rifle was 3 feet away. Might as well be 3 miles. The fighter smiled, recognizing an easy kill. Alara did the only thing she could. She smiled back, and with her left hand, her offhand, the one she barely trained with, she grabbed a rock the size of her fist and hurled it with everything she had left. It caught the fighter in the throat, crushing his windpipe. He staggered backward, weapon dropping, hands going to his neck, eyes wide with shock. He fell. Off the ledge. Into the darkness. Silence. Or maybe she just couldn't hear anymore. Then hands were on her, pulling her up. Martinez, blood streaming down his own face from a shrapnel cut, but alive, moving, functional. Can you walk? His voice was muffled, distant. She nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. He hauled her to her feet, found her rifle, thrust it into her hands. Then they were moving, stumbling away from the ledge, away from the village, toward the rally point where Dalton and Hendricks were waiting. The climb down was a nightmare. Every step sent pain lancing through Alara's side where she'd hit the rock. Her vision kept swimming. Twice, she nearly fell. Both times, Martinez caught her. They reached the rally point to find Dalton setting up a perimeter while Hendricks tended to Keene. The civilian was conscious but clearly traumatized, staring at nothing with wide eyes. "Quinn's hit," Martinez reported. Dalton took one look at her and swore. "How bad?" "Concussion probably, maybe cracked ribs." "She's losing blood from somewhere." "I'm fine," Alara managed, though the words came out slurred. "You're not fine, you're barely standing." Dalton keyed his radio. "Viper TOC, this is Sentinel Actual. We have the package and are ready for extraction, but we have one injured operator. Request medevac." "Negative on medevac," Morrison's voice came back. "Nearest medical bird is 30 minutes out. Your extraction bird is inbound, ETA 3 minutes. Get your operator stabilized and load up." Dalton looked at Alara, clearly doing calculations in his head. 3 minutes to the extraction bird. 20-minute flight back to the FOB. Could she last that long? "Do it," she said. "I can make it." Hendricks moved over, pulling out medical supplies. "Let me see." He checked her over with quick, efficient movements. Found the source of the bleeding, a deep laceration on her scalp where her head had hit rock. He wrapped it with gauze, applied pressure. "Pupils are reactive," he reported to Dalton. "Breathing's okay. She'll make it." The sound of rotors announced the helicopter's arrival. They loaded Keene first, then Alara. Both of them helped aboard by the crew chief. The rest of the team followed, and then they were airborne, climbing fast to get out of range of any remaining threats. Alara leaned her head back against the vibrating wall of the helicopter, closing her eyes. Every part of her hurt, but they'd done it, gotten Keene out. Everyone was alive. "Hey," Hendricks' voice, close to her ear so she could hear over the rotors. "That was the most insane shooting I've ever seen, and I've been doing this for 8 years. She tried to smile, but it hurt too much. "Just math." "Bullshit, that was art." He was quiet for a moment. "But next time you decide to blow up an ammo truck from 1,400 meters, maybe give us a little more warning. I think I had a heart attack." "Noted." Dalton was watching her from across the cabin, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, he nodded once. Not approval exactly, more like acknowledgement of something shared, understood. They touched down at FOB Viper to find medical personnel waiting. Alara tried to walk on her own and made it 3 steps before her legs gave out. The medics caught her, got her on a stretcher, started running diagnostics. Concussion, definitely. 3 cracked ribs. The laceration on her scalp that had bled impressively but wasn't actually life-threatening. Assorted bruises and contusions. "You're lucky," the doctor said, shining a light in her eyes. "That grenade could have killed you." "It almost did," Martinez said from the next bed over, getting his own face stitched up. "She threw a rock at a guy instead of shooting him. Who does that?" "Someone who'd just been blown up and couldn't reach her gun," Alara pointed out. "Fair." The doctor finished his examination. "I'm keeping you overnight for observation. Standard protocol with head injuries. But you'll live." After he left, Ortiz appeared in the doorway, relief plain on his face. "Heard you guys had an exciting evening." "Something like that," Alara said. "Morrison's going to have your heads for ignoring his orders." "Let him try," Martinez grunted. "We got the civilian out. That's what matters." But when Morrison showed up an hour later, he didn't look angry. He looked thoughtful. "Senior Chief Dalton's writing up the after-action report," he said without preamble. "He's recommending Corporal Quinn for a commendation. Says she single-handedly prevented the mission from becoming a complete disaster." "She did more than that," Martinez said. "She saved our lives. Again." Morrison studied Alara for a long moment. "That shot on the ammunition truck. How did you know it would detonate like that?" "I didn't," Alara admitted. "I hoped, but I didn't know." "You took a chance that could have gotten your team killed." I took a chance that could save them. There's a difference. Morrison almost smiled. Maybe there is. He turned to leave, then paused. Your file keeps getting more interesting, Corporal. I'm starting to think there's a lot more to you than standard sniper school can explain. He walked out before she could respond. Martinez whistled low. That guy really doesn't trust you. Seems that way. You gonna tell him whatever it is he wants to know? Alara was quiet for a moment. Outside, she could hear the normal sounds of the FOB, voices, vehicles, the distant thump of helicopters. There's nothing to tell, she said finally. But that was a lie, and they both knew it. The truth was buried back in Montana, in 3 years of training that had nothing to do with the Army and everything to do with a grandfather who'd seen what war could make of people, who'd taught her to read wind and calculate distance before she was old enough to drive, who'd recognized something in her that she hadn't understood herself at the time, a capacity for the work that most people couldn't stomach. He'd been right, and that knowledge sat in her chest like a stone, cold and heavy and undeniable. She could kill without hesitation, could make impossible shots in impossible conditions, could look death in the face and smile. The question was what that made her. A weapon? A protector? Something else entirely? She didn't have an answer, and maybe that was the most frightening thing of all. The medical tent kept her for 18 hours, long enough for the headache to fade from blinding to merely terrible, for the nausea to subside, for her vision to stop doubling at the edges. The doctor cleared her with restrictions. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity, no getting blown up again for at least a week. That last one's not actually medical advice, he said, signing her discharge papers. Just common sense. Alara took the papers and walked out into daylight that felt too bright, too harsh. The FOB looked the same as it always did, dusty, functional, temporary. But something had shifted. Operators she didn't know nodded as she passed. A few actually stopped what they were doing to watch her walk by. Word had spread. About the hostage rescue, the impossible shots, the grenade blast she'd somehow survived. She hated it. Ortiz intercepted her halfway to the barracks. You're supposed to be resting. I rested. For 18 hours, I'm done. The doctor said, the doctor cleared me. She kept walking, forcing him to match her pace. Where's Dalton? Conference room. Has been since you guys got back. Morrison's been in there with him for hours. Ortiz hesitated. Look, I don't know what's going on, but it's not good. There's talk about an investigation, questions about the mission parameters, whether orders were followed. They weren't, Alara said flatly. Morrison told us not to engage. We engaged anyway. To save a hostage. Doesn't matter. We still disobeyed direct orders. She paused outside the barracks. How bad is it? For Dalton? Could be career-ending. For you? Ortiz shook his head. I don't know. But Morrison's been asking questions about you specifically. Your background, your training, how someone with your experience could perform at that level. The stone in Alara's chest grew heavier. He thinks I'm hiding something. Are you? She looked at Ortiz, really looked at him. He'd been kind to her from the start, one of the few who hadn't treated her like an outsider. He deserved the truth, but the truth was complicated and dangerous in ways he couldn't understand. Yeah, she said quietly. I am. Before he could respond, a runner appeared. Corporal Quinn, Senior Chief Dalton requests your presence in the conference room. Immediately. Alara exchanged a glance with Ortiz, then followed the runner across the FOB. The conference room held more people than she expected. Dalton at the head of the table, looking exhausted. Morrison beside him with a stack of files. The major from the pre-mission briefing, and 2 others she didn't recognize, a colonel with ranger tabs and a woman in civilian clothes who had government written all over her. Corporal Quinn, reporting as ordered. Sit, the colonel said. Not invited. Ordered. Alara sat. The colonel studied her for a long moment. I'm Colonel Marcus Reeves, JSOC. This is Agent Sarah Chen, Defense Intelligence Agency. We've been reviewing the after-action reports from your last 2 operations. They make for interesting reading. Yes, sir. And interesting in that they describe events that shouldn't be possible. Shots that exceed the performance envelope of your weapon system. target engagement at ranges and in conditions that would challenge operators with decades of experience, decision-making under pressure that suggests training and experience you shouldn't possess. Reeves leaned forward. So, we have some questions, and I strongly suggest you answer them honestly. Morrison opened one of the files. Let's start with your background. You enlisted 18 months ago. Before that, you were a student at Montana State University. No military family, no JROTC, no shooting sports on record, yet 6 weeks into basic training, you were flagged for advanced marksmanship assessment. Why? I scored well on the rifle range, sir. You scored perfectly, every single shot. The instructors had never seen anything like it. Morrison pulled out a scorecard. Then at Fort Benning, during sniper qualification, you broke 3 course records, records that had stood for over a decade. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Here it was. The question she'd known was coming since the moment she'd made that first shot on the range at FOB Viper. Alara looked at Dalton. He gave her nothing, just watched her with those steady, unreadable eyes. My grandfather, she said finally. He taught me. Your grandfather? Chen spoke for the first time, her voice flat and analytical. Thomas Quinn, former Marine Corps sniper, 3 tours in Vietnam, Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, died 4 years ago. Yes, ma'am. According to your enlistment records, you barely knew him, saw him maybe once a year for holidays. Those records are wrong. The room went very quiet. Explain, Reeves said. Alara took a breath. This was it. The truth she'd kept locked away since enlisting, the story she'd never told anyone. I lived with him for 3 years, from when I was 15 until I was 18. My parents were going through a divorce, bad one, lawyers and custody battles and all that mess. Neither of them wanted me around while they tore each other apart. So they sent me to Montana, to my grandfather's ranch. That's not in your file, Morrison said. No, because my parents didn't want it on record. It would have looked bad in the custody fight, both of them shipping me off to someone else. So they just didn't report it. As far as the official paperwork was concerned, I was living with my mom in Seattle. But you weren't. No, sir. I was on 40 acres in the middle of nowhere, learning everything my grandfather knew about shooting. Chen was making notes. Why would he teach you that? Because I asked him to. Alara met her eyes. Because I was angry and lost and looking for something. Anything that made sense. And shooting made sense. The math, the physics, the discipline. It was clean, logical, no emotions, no people lying to you, just the rifle and the target and the space between. So he trained you, Reeves said, for 3 years. Every day, 6 hours minimum, more on weekends. We built a range that went out to 1,800 meters. He taught me to read wind, calculate elevation, compensate for Coriolis effect, taught me fieldcraft, stalking, camouflage, everything he'd learned in Vietnam, everything that had made him one of the best. Dalton spoke for the first time. Why didn't you mention this when you enlisted? Because I thought it didn't matter. I wasn't trying to be a sniper when I joined up. I just wanted to get away from my parents, have some structure in my life, figure out what I wanted to do. The Army was supposed to be a fresh start. But they tested you, Morrison said. Saw what you could do. And I couldn't exactly hide it, so they sent me to sniper school, and I did what I was trained to do. Alara's voice hardened slightly. But I never lied about my qualifications. I passed every test, met every standard. If anyone had asked directly about my background, I would have told them. No one asked. Until now, Chen said. Until now. Reeves exchanged glances with Chen and Morrison, some silent conversation happening that Alara wasn't part of. Finally, the colonel spoke again. Here's our problem, Corporal. You're a security risk. You have training and capabilities that aren't documented, that we can't verify, that suggest skills far beyond your official experience level. In any other circumstance, we'd pull you from the field pending a full background investigation. Alara's stomach dropped. Sir, However, Reeves continued, you've also proven yourself in combat, twice. You've saved American lives, completed missions that would have failed without you, and demonstrated judgment under fire that many veteran operators lack. He paused. Senior Chief Dalton has recommended you for the Bronze Star, with Valor device for your actions during the hostage rescue. I'm inclined to approve that recommendation. The whiplash from potential discharge to commendation left Alara speechless. But, Reeves added, and there it was, the catch. We need full disclosure. Everything. Your grandfather's training methods, his curriculum, anything he taught you that isn't standard military doctrine, we need to understand exactly what you're capable of. Why? The question came out before she could stop it. Morrison's expression darkened, but Reeves just smiled slightly. Because right now, you're an anomaly, and the military doesn't like anomalies. We like standardization, predictability, training that can be replicated. If you've got skills we don't understand, that makes you either a valuable asset or a dangerous wildcard. We need to figure out which. And if I refuse, then we have to assume the worst, and that ends with you on a transport home, discharged for falsifying enlistment records. It wasn't really a choice, not if she wanted to stay. What do you want to know? Alara asked. For the next 2 hours, they grilled her. Chen took the lead, methodical and thorough, pulling apart every aspect of her grandfather's training. The techniques he'd taught her for reading Mirage, his philosophy on ballistics, on wind calls, on the mental game of long-range shooting, the unconventional methods, meditation exercises, visualization techniques, even some things that sounded almost mystical when she tried to explain them. He said shooting was 90% mental, Alara explained, that the rifle just did what you told it to do, so the real skill was training your mind to see clearly, to not let doubt or fear interfere with the shot. And you believe that? Morrison asked skeptically. I've seen it work. When I'm in the zone behind the scope, it's like everything else falls away. There's no me, no target, just the space between and the path the bullet needs to take. My grandfather called it becoming the shot. That's not in any manual I've read, Dalton said. No, sir. Because it's not something you can teach in a classroom. It's experiential. You either understand it or you don't. Chen was still writing. Did your grandfather teach you anything else? Hand-to-hand combat, explosives, infiltration techniques? No, ma'am. Just shooting. That's all he knew, all he cared about. He said if you were good enough with a rifle, you'd never need to know the rest. But you threw a rock at an armed enemy instead of using your weapon, Reeves pointed out. That suggests combat training beyond just marksmanship. Alara almost laughed. That wasn't training, sir. That was desperation. I couldn't reach my gun, couldn't move, and there was a guy about to shoot me. So I grabbed the nearest object and threw it. Pure survival instinct. Instinct that worked. This time. I wouldn't recommend it as a tactic. Reeves leaned back in his chair, thinking. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to write everything down, every technique, every exercise, every piece of knowledge your grandfather passed on. We'll have some of our own top-tier shooters evaluate it, see if any of it has practical application for training purposes. You want to replicate what he taught me? If possible, yes. The military is always looking for ways to improve marksmanship training. If your grandfather developed techniques that work, we want to know about them. And if I do this, Alara asked, write it all down, let you pick apart his methods? Then you stay in the field, keep doing what you're doing, and we'll keep this little background discrepancy quiet. Reeves stood up. But Corporal, understand this. You're on notice now. No more secrets, no more surprises. From here on out, you're under enhanced scrutiny. That means every shot you take, every decision you make, gets reviewed. One mistake, one hint that you're not what you claim to be, and this conversation goes very differently. Clear? Crystal, sir. Good. Dismissed. Except you, Senior Chief. We still need to discuss the orders situation. Alara stood, saluted, and walked out. The hallway felt too bright after the dim conference room. She leaned against the wall, letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The door opened behind her. Chen emerged, closing it quietly. Walk with me, Corporal. It wasn't a request. They walked in silence toward the perimeter fence, away from the main activity of the FOB. When they were alone, Chen finally spoke. That story you told in there, about your parents' divorce being sent to Montana, that was true? Yes, ma'am. But not complete. Alara stopped walking. What do you mean? Chen turned to face her. I mean that I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've interviewed hundreds of people, many of them trained to lie convincingly. And I know when someone's telling the truth, but not the whole truth. She paused. You loved your grandfather. That much was obvious. But there's something else there. Something you didn't mention. Alara was quiet for a long moment. The sun was setting now, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. He was dying, she said finally. When I came to live with him, lung cancer from all those years smoking in Vietnam. He had maybe 2 years left, the doctors said. I'm sorry. Don't be. He wasn't. Alara smiled slightly at the memory. He told me he'd had a good run, done his part, and now he wanted to pass on what he knew before it died with him. He'd tried teaching my father, but Dad wanted nothing to do with guns or the military, wanted to forget that whole part of his life. But you didn't. No, I wanted to understand. Understand him. Understand what made him the way he was. And he needed someone to carry it forward. His knowledge, his skills. So we made a deal. He'd teach me everything, and I'd... She trailed off. You'd what? I'd use it. Actually use it, not just let it gather dust. He made me promise that if I was going to learn his craft, I'd find a way to put it to work, to honor what he'd sacrificed to learn it. Alara looked at Chen. That's why I enlisted. Not to run from my parents or find structure, to keep a promise to a dying man. Chen studied her face for a long time. That's not the kind of thing you tell a room full of officers during an investigation. No, ma'am. But you told me. Why? Because you asked, and because I'm tired of lying, even by omission. Alara met her eyes. You said I'm a security risk. Maybe I am, but I'm also a soldier trying to do my job and honor my word. If that's not enough, then I don't know what else I can give you. Chen nodded slowly. It's enough, for now. She started walking back toward the main compound. Write that report for Reeves. Be thorough. And Corporal, your grandfather would be proud of what you've done here. How do you know? Because if he's anything like the man in his service record, he understood that sometimes the mission requires things that don't appear in any manual. And from what I've seen, you've inherited more than just his shooting skills. You've got his judgment too. Chen walked away, leaving Alara alone with the sunset and the weight of everything that had been said. She found Dalton an hour later, sitting outside the TOC, smoking a cigarette he'd probably bummed off one of the contractors. He looked tired, not physically, but the deep exhaustion that comes from fighting bureaucracy instead of enemies. You smoke, Senior Chief? He looked up, surprised. Only after I get my ass chewed by colonels. Helps with the taste. He took a drag. You here to check on me or to hear the verdict? Both. Verdict is I get a formal reprimand in my file for disobeying direct orders. Could have been worse. Could have been a lot worse. He stubbed out the cigarette. Morrison argued for a court-martial, said I endangered the entire operation by ignoring his commands. Reeves overruled him, said the successful rescue and 0 friendly casualties spoke for themselves. That's good news. Is it? I've got a black mark now. Probably kills any chance of promotion. But hey, at least I'm not sitting in Leavenworth. He looked at her. How'd your interrogation go? About as well as yours, I think. They know about my grandfather now. Want me to document everything he taught me. You gonna do it? Don't have much choice. Dalton was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I'm glad I had you on that op. Both ops. Whatever secrets you've got, whatever training you're hiding, it saved lives. That counts for something. Thank you, Senior Chief. Don't thank me yet. Morrison's still gunning for you. He doesn't like anomalies, doesn't trust what he can't categorize and control. He's going to keep pushing, keep looking for reasons to remove you from the field. Let him push. That's brave talk. But be careful, Quinn. You've made enemies without meaning to. People who see your success as a threat to their own positions, their own reputations. Hendricks has come around, but there are others who won't. They'll be looking for you to fail. Then I won't fail. Dalton almost smiled. There's that confidence again. Just make sure it doesn't turn into arrogance. That's what gets people killed. Yes, Senior Chief. He stood up, stretching. Get some rest. We're back on the rotation tomorrow. New mission brief at 0800. Something about a Taliban commander who needs finding. The usual. The usual. As if any of this was usual. Alara walked back to the barracks, her mind churning. The day had gone from medical discharge to interrogation to commendation and back again. She felt wrung out, hollowed. Inside, she found Martinez and Ortiz playing cards, Hendricks cleaning his rifle in the corner. "Hey, look who's back from the principal's office," Martinez said. "You get detention?" "Something like that." "Heard you got grilled by the DIA," Hendricks said without looking up from his rifle. "That's never good." "It wasn't that bad." "Liar." But he was smiling slightly. "So what'd you tell them? That you're actually a robot sent from the future to kill terrorists?" "Close, but it's actually aliens. I'm from a distant planet where everyone's a naturally gifted shooter." Martinez laughed. "That would explain a lot, actually." Alara sat down on her bunk, feeling the ache in her ribs, the lingering headache. "They wanted to know about my background, how I learned to shoot." "And you told them?" Ortiz asked. "Had to. They were going to dig either way. Better to control the narrative." Hendricks finally looked up. "So what's the real story?" "Because I've been doing this long enough to know that nobody gets that good without serious training, and serious training leaves a trail." Alara hesitated, then decided they'd earned the truth. Or part of it, anyway. "My grandfather was a Marine sniper in Vietnam. Taught me everything he knew before he died. That's it. No mystery, no secret program. Just an old man passing on his knowledge." "Must have been some old man," Martinez said. "He was." They were quiet for a moment, processing this. Then Hendricks went back to his rifle. "Explains a lot," he said. "Those old Vietnam snipers, the ones who survived, they learned things that never made it into the manuals. Improvisation, adaptation, the kind of skills you only get when you're fighting in a jungle where every tree could hide someone trying to kill you. Yeah. So you've got legacy training, old school. That's not a bad thing." He set down the cleaning rod. "Just means you've got high standards to live up to. Your grandfather was probably a legend." "He was," Alara said quietly. "Congressional Medal of Honor. Over 90 confirmed kills. They called him Ghost because he could hide in plain sight." "Ghost," Martinez repeated. "That's a hell of a name to inherit." "I'm not trying to inherit anything. I'm just trying to do my job." "Could have fooled me," Hendricks said. "The way you shoot, you're already there. You just haven't accepted it yet." Before Alara could respond, the barracks door opened. Collins walked in, moving carefully on crutches, his leg wrapped in a heavy bandage. "Well, look who's mobile," Martinez said. "How's the leg?" "Hurts like hell, but I'll live, thanks to someone in this room." Collins looked at Alara. "I don't think I properly thanked you for dragging my ass out of that kill zone." "You already thanked me, in the helicopter." "That doesn't count. I was high on morphine." He moved over, extending his hand. "So thank you. Seriously, I'd be dead if you hadn't come for me." Alara shook his hand. "Anyone would have done the same. Except they didn't. You did. And you disobeyed orders to do it." He smiled. "That takes either courage or stupidity, and I'm choosing to believe it's courage." "Might be both," Ortiz offered. They talked for a while longer, the conversation drifting from the mission to speculation about the next one, to complaints about the food, to all the mundane topics that soldiers everywhere use to avoid thinking about the things that actually matter. Eventually, everyone drifted off to their own bunks. The lights went out, but Alara lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. She'd told them about her grandfather, about the training, but she hadn't told them everything. Hadn't told them about the last conversation she'd had with him 3 weeks before he died. When the cancer had taken his voice and most of his strength, but his eyes were still sharp, still seeing. He'd written it down because he couldn't speak. 3 words on a piece of paper, his handwriting shaky but legible. "Don't become me." She'd asked what he meant. He'd written more. "The shooting is a tool. Don't let it become your identity. Don't let it hollow you out the way it did me. Use it, but remember there's more to you than what you can do with a rifle." She'd promised she would. Had promised she'd stay human, stay whole. But lying there in the dark, feeling nothing about the people she'd killed, feeling only the cold satisfaction of shots well placed, she wondered if she'd already broken that promise. If somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being Alara Quinn and started being just a weapon. A very effective, very efficient weapon. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt almost comforting. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. Sleep never came. Alara lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of other people dreaming. Martinez's quiet snoring, someone muttering in their sleep, the creak of bunks as bodies shifted. Normal sounds, human sounds, She felt separated from all of it by something invisible and absolute. At 05:30, she gave up pretending and got dressed. The FOB was just waking up, the sky still dark but threatening dawn. She walked to the range, needing something familiar, something that made sense. Her rifle felt right in her hands. Always did. She set up at the 600-meter line and started shooting, not keeping score, just finding that quiet place where nothing else existed. She was on her third magazine when she heard footsteps behind her. "Couldn't sleep either?" Dalton's voice. "No, Senior Chief." He stood beside her, watching her shoot. 5 rounds, tight group, dead center. "You know what I see when I watch you shoot?" he asked. "What's that, Senior Chief?" "Someone trying to disappear into the work. Like if you're good enough, precise enough, you won't have to be a person anymore. Just a function." He paused. "I did the same thing after my second tour. Threw myself into training, into the job, because it was easier than dealing with what I'd become." Alara lowered her rifle. "What did you become?" "Someone who could kill without thinking about it. Someone who measured success in body counts and mission completions instead of the things that used to matter." He looked out at the targets. "It took me a long time to figure out that being good at this doesn't mean you have to let it consume you, that you can be effective without being empty." "How'd you figure it out?" "Lost someone I cared about. Another operator, good friend. He died because I was so focused on the mission that I missed the signs he was breaking. Pushed him too hard, didn't see he was at his limit." Dalton's voice went quiet. "After that, I had to choose. Become more human or become a better weapon. Couldn't be both and stay sane." "Which did you choose?" "Still figuring it out." He turned to face her. "But I know which one you're choosing right now, Quinn, and I'm telling you it's the wrong path. You're 19 years old. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Don't let this job hollow you out before you've even had a chance to be someone." "What if this is who I am? What if I'm just good at killing and nothing else?" "Bullshit. You saved Collins when every tactical consideration said not to. You threw yourself into danger for someone else. That's not a weapon acting. That's a person making a choice." Alara was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather told me not to become him, right before he died. I didn't understand what he meant then. And now? Now I think I'm doing exactly what he warned me against." Dalton nodded slowly. "Then stop, or at least try. Because Quinn, you're one of the best shooters I've ever seen. But if that's all you are, you're going to burn out fast and hard. This job needs operators who can think, who can feel, who can make human judgments in inhuman situations. Don't throw that away trying to be perfect." He walked off, leaving her alone with the targets and the truth. The mission brief at 0800 was straightforward. Taliban regional commander, confirmed location, standard capture or kill operation. The team would insert at dawn the following day, approach undercover, set up observation, and wait for the target to show. Alara's role: overwatch from a ridge position 900 meters from the compound. Standard assignment. Nothing unusual. Except Morrison was there, watching her throughout the briefing with those unblinking eyes. Evaluating, judging. After the brief, he pulled her aside. "I'll be accompanying this mission," he said without preamble. "Observer status. I want to see you work." "Yes, sir." "And Quinn, don't do anything heroic. Don't improvise. Don't disobey orders. Just do exactly what you're assigned to do. Understand?" "Crystal, sir." But his eyes said he didn't believe her, that he was waiting for her to make a mistake. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Alara wrote the report Reeves had demanded. 20 pages detailing her grandfather's training methods, his techniques, everything she could remember. It felt like a betrayal somehow, reducing 3 years of memories and lessons to clinical documentation. But she did it anyway. That evening, she found Hendricks in the armory, checking equipment. "You ever regret this?" she asked. He looked up, surprised by the question. "Regret what? The job?" "All of it. Choosing this life, becoming what we are." Hendricks set down the magazine he was inspecting. "Sometimes. Usually around 3 in the morning when I can't sleep and I'm thinking about all the things I've done. But then morning comes and I remember why I'm here." "Why are you here?" "Because someone has to be, because there are bad people doing bad things, and talking at them doesn't work. So we do the hard work, the ugly work, so other people don't have to." He met her eyes. That doesn't make us monsters, Quinn. It makes us necessary. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah, monsters enjoy it. We just accept it. What if I don't feel anything about it? What if killing someone is just solving a problem? Hendricks was quiet for a long moment. Then you're probably going to be very good at this job for a very short time before it destroys you. Or you figure out how to hold on to your humanity despite what you can do. And you last long enough to make a real difference. He paused. Your call which path you take. But I've seen both. And only one ends well. The helicopter insertion went smoothly. They landed at 0545 just as dawn was breaking and moved into position without incident. The ridge gave a perfect view of the target compound, better than the intelligence photos had suggested. Alara set up her rifle while Dalton and the assault element moved into their positions. Morrison stayed with her, positioned where he could observe without interfering. She could feel his attention like a physical weight. Target compound is quiet, she reported. No movement visible. Copy, Dalton responded. We're in position. Now we wait. Waiting was the hardest part. Lying still, barely breathing, watching through the scope as minutes turned into hours. The sun climbed, temperature rose, mirage started dancing across the valley. Morrison never moved, just watched her with that analytical gaze. At 11:47, movement. I've got activity, Alara transmitted. 3 males, military age, armed, exiting the main building. Confirmed, Dalton responded. But that's not our target. Hold fire. More waiting, more watching. Then at 12:03, a vehicle approached. A Toyota Hilux, dusty and worn. It pulled into the compound courtyard. A man emerged from the building to meet it. Older, bearded, moving with the confidence of command. That's him, Dalton confirmed. That's our target. All elements stand by. Alara tracked him through her scope, watching as he spoke with the driver, gestured toward the building. He was relaxed, comfortable. Thought he was safe here. Sentinel actual to all elements. Dalton's voice was calm, professional. We are weapons free on primary target. Assault element will move on my mark. Quinn, you have priority engagement if he tries to run. Clear? Clear, Senior Chief. Beside her, Morrison shifted slightly. Remember, Corporal, only engage on orders or if the target flees, not before. Yes, sir. The assault element moved, fast, precise, covering the distance to the compound in seconds. They were inside before the guards knew what was happening. Shots. The sharp crack of suppressed weapons. Then chaos. The target ran, not toward the vehicle, but toward a back exit Alara hadn't seen in the satellite imagery. He's running, Hendricks transmitted. East side, heading for an explosion, not from the compound, but from beyond it. Secondary position, fighters emerging from concealment. It was an ambush, again. Contact rear, Martinez shouted. We've got at least 20 hostiles moving on our 6. The assault element was trapped, caught between the compound and the enemy reinforcements, taking fire from both directions. Alara's scope found the Taliban commander. He was still running, using the confusion to escape. Quinn, take the shot, Dalton ordered. Drop him before he gets away. Her finger moved to the trigger. Easy shot. 400 meters, clear sight picture, minimal wind. But behind the commander, running in the same direction, were 3 children. Boys, maybe 7 or 8 years old, fleeing the gunfire. If she missed, if the round went through, if anything went wrong, Quinn, I need that shot. Dalton's voice was urgent now. More fire, heavier. The assault element was getting overwhelmed. Morrison's voice right beside her. Do not engage if there's any risk to civilians. That's an order. The commander was getting away. 50 meters, 60. The children were still behind him, running parallel, maybe 10 meters offset. Her finger froze. Quinn, Hendricks this time, desperation creeping into his voice. We need fire support now. The commander reached a vehicle, a motorcycle, and started it. Alara swung her rifle, finding a new target. Not the commander, but the fighters assaulting the team's position. She started dropping them, methodically, one after another. Negative on primary target, she transmitted, her voice steady even as her heart hammered. Shifting to hostile suppression. What? Morrison's voice was sharp. Why didn't you take the shot? Civilians in the line of fire, sir. Couldn't guarantee clean engagement. She kept shooting, thinning the enemy numbers, giving the assault element room to maneuver. But the commander was gone now, disappeared into the valley on that motorcycle. Mission failure. Because she'd hesitated. The firefight lasted another 6 minutes. When it was over, 8 enemy fighters were dead, the rest scattered. 0 friendly casualties. And the primary target was in the wind. The extraction was silent. No one spoke on the helicopter ride back. Dalton's face was unreadable. Morrison's was not. He looked vindicated, like she'd just confirmed every suspicion he'd ever had about her. The debriefing was brutal. "You had a clear shot," Morrison said, his voice cold and clinical. "Senior Chief Dalton gave you a direct order to engage. Why didn't you?" "There were children in the potential trajectory, sir. If the round had over-penetrated, if my calculations were off, your calculations are never off. That's what everyone keeps telling me. That you're some kind of prodigy who can make impossible shots." Morrison leaned forward. "So what changed? Why suddenly doubt yourself?" Alara met his eyes. "Because they were children, sir. And killing a high-value target isn't worth risking kids who had nothing to do with this. That wasn't your call to make." "Actually, sir, it was. Rules of engagement are clear. Avoid civilian casualties whenever possible. I assessed the situation and determined the risk was too high." "You let him get away?" "Yes, sir, I did." The room was silent. Reeves, observing from the corner, made a note. Dalton's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Morrison stood up, pacing. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're too emotional, too concerned with being the hero who does the right thing. This job requires difficult decisions. Sometimes the mission has to come first." "Not ahead of children, it doesn't," Alara said quietly. "Corporal?" "Sir, with all due respect, you weren't there. You didn't see those kids. They were running from the gunfire, scared, vulnerable. If I'd taken that shot and killed one of them, would the mission's success have been worth it? Would you want that on your conscience?" Morrison's face reddened. "I'm not interested in philosophy. I'm interested in results. And the result is that a Taliban commander who's responsible for the deaths of dozens of Afghan civilians is still out there because you couldn't pull the trigger." "I pulled the trigger plenty of times, sir, just not at him." "And that's supposed to make this acceptable?" "It's supposed to make me still human." The words hung in the air. Morrison stared at her, his anger warring with something else, maybe understanding, maybe just frustration. Reeves stood up. "That's enough, both of you." He looked at Morrison. "Captain, you're dismissed. I want to speak with Corporal Quinn alone." Morrison left, his body language radiating fury. The door closed behind him with more force than necessary. Reeves studied Alara for a long moment. "That was either the stupidest thing you've ever done or the bravest. I'm not sure which." "Probably both, sir." "Morrison's going to recommend you be removed from combat operations. Reassigned to training duty stateside." Alara's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice level. "Yes, sir. I understand." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you just threw away your career to protect children you don't know, in a country you'll probably never visit again, in a war that doesn't have easy answers." Reeves sat down. "Why?" "Because my grandfather didn't fight in Vietnam, so I could become someone who kills kids, sir. Because the day I can look at children in danger and only see a tactical problem is the day I should turn in my rifle and go home." She paused. "And because if we're not better than the people we're fighting, then what's the point?" Reeves was quiet for a long time. Then, surprisingly, he smiled slightly. "Morrison's wrong about you. You're not too emotional. You're exactly as emotional as you need to be." He stood up. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to personally review this mission and submit my own report. In that report, I'm going to note that you made a tactically sound decision based on rules of engagement and concern for civilian casualties. The mission didn't succeed, but it didn't fail because of you. It failed because our intelligence was compromised again. Sir, you don't have to..." "I'm not doing you a favor, Corporal. I'm doing my job, which includes making sure good operators don't get crucified for making the right call in a bad situation." He moved toward the door. "You're staying in the field. But Quinn? Morrison's not done with you. He's going to keep pushing, keep looking for reasons to prove you don't belong. Watch your back." After he left, Alara sat alone in the conference room trying to process what had just happened. She'd failed the mission, let the target escape, but somehow she didn't feel like she'd failed anything that mattered. The door opened again. Dalton. He sat down across from her, his expression still unreadable. "I'm sorry, Senior Chief." Ilara said. I should have taken the shot. Maybe. Or maybe you made the only choice you could live with. He was quiet for a moment. When I gave you that order, I couldn't see what you saw. Didn't know about the kids. Would I have given the same order if I had? I don't know. Neither do I. That's what haunts me. He leaned back. You know what the hardest part of this job is? It's not the shooting or the danger or even the killing. It's the decisions. The ones where every option is bad. And you have to choose the least terrible one. Today, you chose. And yeah, the target got away. But you can look at yourself in the mirror tonight without seeing a child killer. That's worth something. Is it enough? That's not for me to answer. Only you can decide what enough looks like. He left her alone with that thought. That night, Ilara walked to the edge of the FOB, looking out at the mountains. Somewhere out there was a Taliban commander who'd lived to fight another day because she'd hesitated. How many people would he kill? How much blood would be on her hands for letting him go? She didn't have answers, but she had something else. A piece of paper her grandfather had written that she'd kept folded in her pocket since the day he died. She pulled it out, reading the familiar words again in the fading light. Don't become me. 3 words. A whole philosophy. She understood now. He hadn't meant don't be a sniper or don't use the skills he'd taught her. He'd meant don't let it consume you. Don't reduce yourself to just the weapon. Stay human, even when being human is harder than being a machine. Today, she'd chosen human, and it had cost her the mission. Tomorrow, she'd have to choose again, and the day after that. But at least the choice was still hers to make. Figured I'd find you out here. She turned. Hendricks, walking up with his hands in his pockets. Came to tell me I screwed up, she asked. Nope. Came to tell you I would have made the same call. He stood beside her, looking at the mountains. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're the kind of operator who still gives a damn about who's in the crosshairs. We need more of that, not less. Morrison doesn't think so. Morrison's never been in the field when the call gets hard. He's all theory and policy. You're the one who has to live with what you do. Hendricks paused. Besides, word is Reeves is backing you, and he outranks Morrison by a lot. So you're probably fine. Probably. This is the army. Nothing's guaranteed. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sunset. Can I ask you something? Ilara said. Shoot. Did I make the right choice? Hendricks thought about it. There wasn't a right choice. Just the one you could live with. And yeah, that one seems pretty right to me. Over the next week, the base settled back into routine. Training, maintenance, waiting for the next mission. The Bronze Star came through. Formal ceremony, stiff uniform, Reeves pinning the medal to her chest while the entire task force watched. Dalton shook her hand. Even Morrison was there, though his expression suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Afterward, Collins found her. Fancy hardware, he said, gesturing to the medal. Just metal. No, it's not. It's recognition. Acknowledgement that you did something that mattered. He smiled. Take the win, Quinn. We don't get many of them in this job. 2 days later, Agent Chen returned to the FOB. She pulled Ilara aside, away from the others. I read your report, Chen said. The one about your grandfather's training methods. And it's fascinating. Some of it we can't use, too subjective, too reliant on individual intuition. But some of it? Chen smiled slightly. We're already incorporating it into the advanced sniper curriculum. You might have just changed how we train the next generation of shooters. My grandfather would have liked that. I think he would have liked you more. What you've become, despite everything trying to turn you into something else. Chen handed her a file. This is a copy of your updated service record. Everything's in order now. No more questions about your background, no more asterisks. You're cleared for any assignment you want. Ilara opened the file, scanning the pages. It was all there. Her grandfather's training, her enlistment, her combat actions. Official now. Part of the record. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned it. Chen turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Morrison put in for a transfer. He's going back stateside, teaching at the War College. You won't have to deal with him anymore. Did Reeves force him out? Let's just say it was strongly suggested that his talents might be better used elsewhere. Chen's expression was neutral, but her eyes held a hint of satisfaction. Sometimes the system works. The final mission came 3 weeks later. Not a combat operation, but something simpler. Overwatch for a supply convoy moving through contested territory. Alara's job was to sit on a hillside and watch, make sure nothing threatened the vehicles. It was boring, routine, safe, perfect. She set up her rifle and spent 6 hours watching trucks roll through a valley, her presence keeping everyone just that much more secure. No shots fired, no drama, just a job done well. When the convoy was clear, she packed up and headed back to the extraction point. Dalton was waiting there. "Quiet day?" he asked. "Best kind." "Yeah." He looked at her, really looked at her. "You seem different, lighter, maybe." "Just tired of fighting myself, Senior Chief." "Good. That's the hardest fight there is," he gestured to the helicopter. "Let's go home." They flew back as the sun set, the landscape below turning gold and shadow. Alara looked out at it, at the mountains and valleys, and all the hidden places where people lived and fought and died. She'd come here looking for a purpose, trying to honor a promise to a dying man. And she'd found it, but not in the way she expected. Her grandfather had taught her to be a sniper. But Dalton, Hendricks, even Morrison in his own way, had taught her something more important, that the skill was just a tool. What mattered was the person holding it, and she was still becoming that person. Still figuring out who Alara Quinn was when she wasn't behind a rifle, when she wasn't solving problems with ballistics and mathematics. It would take time, maybe a lifetime, but she had time now, had earned it, one difficult choice at a time. The helicopter touched down at FOB Viper, just as the last light faded from the sky. Alara climbed out, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulders from carrying the rifle all day, the burn in her legs from the hike. Good pain, earned pain. Ortiz was waiting by the landing pad. "Got mail for you," he said, handing her an envelope. It was from her mother. First letter she'd sent in months. Alara opened it, read the brief message. "Apologies for the silence. Hope you're safe. Thinking about you." Not much, but something. She folded it carefully and put it in her pocket next to the paper from her grandfather. Past and future both carried forward. "You good?" Ortiz asked. Alara looked around at the FOB, the dusty compound that had become home, the mountains that had tested her, the people who'd challenged her to be more than just good at killing. "Yeah," she said. "I'm good." And for the first time since arriving in Afghanistan, she actually meant it. The deployments would continue. The missions would come, some successful, some not. People would challenge her, doubt her, test her. Morrison types would always exist, looking for reasons to exclude anyone who didn't fit their comfortable categories. But Alara had learned something crucial in these mountains. Something her grandfather had tried to tell her, but she'd had to discover for herself. Being good at this job didn't mean letting it define her. She could be a sniper without becoming just a sniper, could serve without losing herself, could make the hard choices while still holding on to the pieces of humanity that made the choices matter. It wasn't easy. Some days it felt impossible, but it was worth it. Because at the end of the day, when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a weapon looking back. She saw a 19-year-old kid from Montana who'd learned to shoot from a man who'd survived hell, who'd chosen to use that gift to protect people instead of just being good at taking them out. She saw someone still learning, still growing, still human, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Months later, when her deployment ended and she rotated back stateside, Alara would visit her grandfather's grave, would tell him about the missions, the choices, the moments where his lessons had saved lives, would tell him she understood now what he'd meant, what he'd been trying to protect her from, would tell him she'd kept her promise, both of them, to use what he'd taught her and to not let it consume her. She'd leave the bronze star on his headstone, not because she didn't value it, but because he'd earned it more than she had. Everything she'd done, everything she'd become, started with him. And as she walked away from that Montana cemetery, she'd make a new promise. To keep fighting, not just the external battles, but the internal ones. To stay whole, to remember that the measure of an operator wasn't just accuracy and kill counts, but the wisdom to know when not to pull the trigger. Because respect isn't earned through force or perfection. It's earned in the moments when no one else is watching, when the hard choice is also the right one, when you dare to be human in a job that demands you be anything but. That's the lesson nobody taught in training. That's the truth worth fighting for. Respect isn't given by rank or words. It's earned in the moment no one else dares to act, and in the moment you dare to show restraint when everyone expects you to pull the trigger.